Hello, I'm Full Paragon, and this is the tier list update for March 2023. Hail, Goddess of Victory. So Festival Chris has arrived, and she will dominate the meta for a year and more. You can get her right now, and I highly recommend pulling for her, or you will suffer. She goes into Triple S tier, which is a brand new tier created just for her. As for the other units on the banner, the Christmas Demons, they're fine. They will see at least a little use, but they won't be required or define the meta. They'll be firmly in A tier. As for the other Christmas banner, Iris is fine. Is Christmas Iris better than Valentine's Iris? Maybe a little, but Iris isn't used that much anymore, and there's rarely a time where the water trio will die and she'll need to step in. She'll go in A or B tier, it kinda depends. As for Aru, Christmas Aru has a tier 1 weakness and a tier 1 agility buff. Both of those just don't cut it in the current meta. She'll go into B tier. The fire tier list is relatively unchanged. Maid Leah continues to be the absolute best thing here. You'll often be using Festival Megamine, as she's definitely the best way to use Railgun or Explosion, and that's still the best way to get a very high score in Fire Arena most of the time. Butler Kazuma is also a pretty decent option for a trait, but he does compete with Festival Megamine. One of them will be the one that you'll run. Christmas Wiz continues to be very good thanks to her large gauge boost, which is something you will need if you want to get those large explosions off. Kenpo Mitsurugi is a great source of cooldown cut, which as always is a very potent ability. Ainomiya has that very nice tier 2 agility buff. She doesn't work quite as well with Leah, as Leah can supply one with her ult, but you can use both of them if you need to and it'll work out pretty good. Komeko works well because of Festival Megamine's steroids for Christmas Demons, and because she has a fire-typed ult allowing her to work pretty well. I've demoted Halloween Union here, she just isn't quite as powerful anymore with that tier 1 agility buff, not cutting it. The same goes for Bell, he just isn't as good as Kenpo Mitsurugi and loses out to him. Water is also really unchanged. The fact of the matter is Godqua continues to be absolutely the best thing around as far as the water meta goes. This is also one of the few places that you won't be using Festival Chris. She will be instead replaced by Ninja Chris, as this is the element where Festival Chris would be weak, and Ninja Chris is not only a weakness enabler, but still has those very strong ults. You'll be using her along with Swimsuit Erica. You can run Iris in the back, but frankly, she could go down to B tier, whether we're talking the Valentine's or Christmas version, as the reality is you will pretty much just be using the water trio in water, at least until we start to get some replacements around the June-July timeframe. Lightning is one element where you're gonna start to see Festival Chris show up. We're already seeing in the current arena just how strong she is, and she's either showing up in rear 5 for the very top teams, or even up front, as that cooldown cut that she has is just really awesome. The best teams will probably run Festival Kazuma and Meru, as they have amazing ults and skills to be using in Lightning, while School Union has a Lightning-typed ult and can be a nuke to explode for a lot of damage. Kenpo Ren has cooldown cut, and she can kind of be replaced by Festival Chris, but she still does just a little bit more damage. Earth is where we really start to see the impacts of Festival Chris. She will totally eclipse Summer Chris, who's going to drop down into B tier. There honestly is never a time where you would use Summer Chris over Festival Chris. Summer Chris still has cooldown cut and a self tier 2 agility buff, but that just doesn't compare to a team tier 2 agility buff along with the same cooldown cut. You'll see her run alongside Vanier, because what Vanier really has is a stellar kit that could really benefit from some increased agility to give him more survivability with his healing. Alongside of them, I expect to see a combination of Onsen Mel and Christmas Union, with occasionally casual Mitsurugi showing up if you need some debuff block to prevent some boss shenanigans. In her home element, there is just absolutely no beating Festival Chris. We're seeing Eyes drop all the way from an S tier unit to B tier. The fact of the matter is, she just can't hold a candle to Chris. Everything Chris does is better than what Eyes does. Her team agility buff is better than Eyes' selfish agility buff. Her ultimate buffs both magic and physical attack instead of just physical attack in Eyes' case, and her basics are typed. Cooldown cut is also just generally better than a 10% gauge fill attack, so Chris is going to absolutely dominate the win meta. The characters who play best with her are going to be Idle Kazuma and Casual Leah. Casual Leah has our elemental damage type buff, while Kazuma has a weakness debuff that will go very, very well with Chris. In the back, you'll run PJ Melissa. Since she buffs wind damage and Festival Chris deals pure wind damage, she's really going to be a nice boost to the output of your team. In the light element, the new Overlord units show their first presence in the meta. Shaltir is very, very good, and as she has already shown in the Hans Arena, she can put an absolute monstrous amount of damage out thanks to her transformative ult. I would expect to see her run with Danmachi Aqua and Darkness as usual, although she can run with a mixed hybrid team using characters like Maid Rin or RP Aru. You will of course want to have Idol Meru in the back, as she has the trait slave for this. We're seeing more and more old favorites fall down, like the original Yunyun, and of course Arabian. Mitsu had a very brief moment in the sun, but frankly Shaltir is just better than him. He won't really see any usage moving on. The exception in light for the new Overlord units is of course Lolly Vampire Megumin. Frankly, she just won't be seen at all, and we will continue to use ReZero Megumin. This is also ReZero Megumin's last real place she'll see any use. She'll remain in A tier because she really still is the best Megumin in this element, but from now on I would only expect to see ReZero Megumin used in light and not in every arena. So Dark is an odd element. Ainz did take over here, and he's definitely the best Dark unit, but I did put one solitary 3-star in the tier list, and that is Welfare Rin. The fact of the matter is Welfare Rin is better than Ninja Rin, and she's probably also better than original Aru. Her typed Dark ultimate is very powerful, along with her self-agility buff and the attack down on the boss. She probably won't be run up front. In Dark, I expect to see Ainz, Yakuta Yunyun, and then Maid Leah as the premier team, with Rin bringing up the back row. We might also see a little bit of Festival Chris here. She's just very strong, and because she can buff Ainz and Yunyun, or do agility down on the boss, she will see some use in the Dark element. And now we come to our low tier units, or as I like to call it, the Dustbin. You'll notice that most of the irises have finally fallen into the off meta tier. The reality is that her selfish kit just doesn't really have a place in the game anymore. The R5 slot is increasingly going to be taken up by trait slaves, and teams just don't have room for a selfish unit that only brings DPS to the table when so much of this game relies on stacking buffs and debuffs that have good synergy with your teams. There are still some units in the off-meta tier that I think you could use to make a strong party. We have seen some use from Swimsuit Aqua in this latest arena, for example, but these are the units that just aren't standing up the way they used to, or just don't perform well in the current meta. The lower tier units in the weak and Dustbin tier just have no place at all, and frankly as a character, Dust is such a joke they could delete him and no one would even notice. And of course we have our top meta units, frontlined by Festival Chris. She's just so good that I expect her to slot into multiple elements and teams as the optimal unit. And even when she's not the optimal unit, if you're missing certain characters in your roster, she brings so much to the table between her cooldown cut, agility buff, attack buff, or even an agility down on the boss that she can be used to replace a variety of characters and do an incredible job. Godqua and Maid Leah are still amazing units. Godqua for her ability to keep teams alive and provide a great deal of support, and Leah for having great buffing ultimates and of course being generally the best weakness enabler out of any unit. Other top meta units also provide a great deal of synergy to teams, either providing multiple buffs or debuffs, or having a single buff or debuff that's so overwhelmingly strong that you want to bring them to multiple teams. The meta units also provide good team synergy. As time has gone on in this game, there have been more systems and buffs introduced, and if you want to get a top arena score, you need to be using them as much as possible. Right now, I would say the key buffs are an attack buff, and a tier 2 or better agility buff, a weakness enabler, and if you can swing it somehow, a defense debuff of the appropriate type on the boss. It's a lot to squeeze into a team, which is why characters like Megumin don't really have a place anymore, because more and more that slot is needed to be able to get the most out of your team. That's the video, thanks for watching. We bid fond farewell to our former meta queens of Megumin and Aiz, who are joined by the meta queens of Christmas Pass, who welcome them as they are put out to pasture for the last time. Come back soon for more Konosuba Fantastic Days, videos and guides.